Captain Thea Coronis, skipper of the battered freighter, the unlikely hero, squinted through the scarred plasteel viewport of her cockpit. The nebula ahead was a bruised purple and orange tapestry, beautiful and potentially lethal. This was uncharted space, or at least space very lightly charted, on the fringes of the Andromeda galaxy. Thea was running a cargo of rare, slightly less than legal medical components destined for a backwater human colony called New Syracuse. The credits were good, but the risk was higher than she'd like to admit. Her navigator, a lanky, green-skinned Voltian named Cairo, clucked worriedly from his console. "Captain, the gravity wells are inconsistent. The hero's nav computer is having disagreements." He tapped a three-fingered hand nervously against his scaled chin. "Tell the nav computer to win the argument, Cairo. We're on a clock." "And the sensors are picking up something else." Cairo's large dark eyes widened. "A distress beacon. It's old." "And not human." Thea's stomach tightened. A distress beacon in this neighborhood could be anything from a genuine plea for help to a pirate's lure. The smart thing was to ignore it and keep moving. But Thea wasn't known for doing the smart thing, especially when there was a chance, however slim, of salvage or credits. And something in her just couldn't ignore a cry for help, even an ancient one. "Can you pinpoint the source?" she asked. "Relatively. It seems to be emanating from a larger, stable mass within the nebula, possibly a planet or a very large asteroid." Thea sighed. "All right. Adjust course, Cairo. Let's see what's calling for help." As the hero dipped into the swirling colors of the nebula, the comm system crackled to life. It wasn't the standard distress pulse. It was voice, distorted, layered, but undeniably vocal. "If you can hear this, please. The cycle is broken. The light must be restored." It was a woman's voice, accented and melodic, but thick with fear and exhaustion. Cairo's crest flattened against his skull. "Captain, I don't recognize that language, but the translators are attempting it." The voice faded, replaced by static, then cut out completely. The source of the beacon was a small rocky planet, surprisingly dense and shrouded in a thin, tenuous atmosphere. The nebula's gases gave the entire sky a perpetual, bruised sunset hue. Cairo managed to guide the hero into a stable orbit. Picking up a single localized life sign. It's faint, but it's there. And some kind of artificial structure, very old. Thea made a split-second decision. "I'm going down, alone. You stay with the ship, keep the engines hot, and the shields primed. If I don't check in every 15 minutes, you have authorization to leave." "Captain, that is highly ill-advised," Cairo objected, his crest twitching. "Cairo, if it's a trap, the last thing we need is both of us caught. I'm faster and harder to hit. Plus," she grinned, a quick, cocky expression that didn't quite reach her eyes, "I need to make sure you don't scratch the hero's paint while I'm gone." Thea suited up, the armored, form-fitting X-suit as familiar to her as a second skin. She checked her pulse pistol, her multi-tool, and a packet of nutrient paste. Standard procedure for an unknown away mission. The descent in the hero's aging shuttle was bumpy. The planet's gravity was stronger than expected, and the atmospheric turbulence was fierce. She set the shuttle down in a relatively flat plain near the signal source. She stepped out onto the alien soil. It was a pale, dusty gray crunching under her armored boots. The air, filtered by her helmet, smelled faintly of ozone and dust. Ahead of her, rising out of the dust, was the structure. It was unlike anything she'd ever seen. Not metal, not stone, but some material that seemed to ripple and shift, catching the nebula's light in mesmerizing patterns. It was geometric, but organic, a vast, complex building that looked like a temple or a laboratory, or perhaps something that served both functions. It was undeniably ancient and undeniably beautiful. The faint life sign Cairo had detected was radiating from the heart of the structure. The distress beacon had gone silent. Thea approached the massive entrance. There was no door, just an opening that seemed to swallow the light. She took a deep breath, checked her comms, and stepped inside. The interior was vast, the air still and silent. The rippling material formed complex archways and platforms. In the center of the main hall, beneath a soaring dome, was a large, glowing, crystalline object. It pulsed with a soft, warm light that seemed to be the source of the life sign and the distress signal. And lying at its base, curled in a heap, was a woman. Pale and thin, was etched with fatigue, and her face, pale and thin, was etched with fatigue and pain. She looked up as Thea approached, her eyes, a startling clear blue, widening in surprise and what might have been relief. You came," the woman rasped, her voice the same one from the distress call. "I didn't think any would answer." She coughed, a wet, rattling sound. Thea hurried over and knelt beside her. "Easy, take it easy. Cairo, I have visual on the source. It's a woman. Humanoid. Injured, I think." "Copy that, Captain. Shields are at 80%. Ready for extraction on your word." Thea turned back to the woman. "I'm Captain Thea Coronis. We're going to get you out of here." The woman shook her head weakly. "No, too late. The light is failing." She gestured toward the great crystal structure. "The Chronos crystal. It powers this world, keeps the cycle from collapsing." "Cycle? What cycle?" "The cycle of time." The woman managed a weak, painful smile. "My people, we were the keepers. We maintained it. But something happened, an echo. Now it is breaking." She reached out, a shaking hand touching Thea's armored forearm. The next keeper must be chosen. Before Thea could ask what that meant, a sharp, buzzing sound echoed through the hall. Not from the crystal or the woman. From the entrance she had just come through. Cairo's voice crackled on her comms, distorted but panicked. "Captain, we have incoming, multiple contacts, small, fast. They just appeared in the system. They are not responding to hails. They are powering weapons. You need to get to the shuttle, now." Thea looked back at the entrance. Swarming through the opening were small, dark, metallic objects, buzzing with the sound of mechanical locusts. They were sleek, multi-limbed, and looked lethally efficient. "What are those?" she demanded of the woman. The woman's expression tightened in despair. "The Void Hunters. They are drawn to the failing light. They seek the crystal. And you." Thea didn't hesitate. She drew her pulse pistol, the familiar weight a small comfort. "Well," she muttered, "looks like things just got complicated." The swarm of metallic locusts, the Void Hunters, didn't move like drones. They moved like a fluid, a silver, buzzing, hungry liquid that sought to consume everything in its path. Thea's pulse pistol spat bolts of superheated plasma, vaporizing the lead units. But for every one she downed, 3 more screeched into existence, emerging from the shifting organic walls of the temple. Cairo! I need extraction now. The walls are trying to eat me. Captain, the shuttle is locked in a gravity feedback loop. I can't move. The entire planet is vibrating at a frequency I can't neutralize. Thea ducked behind a crystalline pillar as a swarm of jagged blades whipped past her head, scoring deep, glowing gouges into the stone. She looked at the woman, whose breathing was ragged and shallow. "You have to touch the crystal," the woman gasped, her voice barely audible over the mechanical screeching. "It will not choose unless it recognizes blood, human blood." "I'm not exactly looking for a mystical upgrade, lady," Thea yelled, firing blindly over the pillar as a chunk of debris tore off the ceiling. The woman reached out, her hand glowing with a faint, dying luminescence. "It is not a choice of power. It is a choice of survival. If you do not, the hunters will harvest the timeline, and your people will never exist." That stopped Thea cold. The casual threat of cosmic erasure was a hell of a motivator. She looked at the humming, pulsing heart of the temple. It wasn't just a light. It was a massive, ancient neural interface. Thea holstered her pistol. She ran toward the crystal. The void hunters surged, closing the distance, their buzzing blades mere feet from her spine. She didn't look back. She slammed her armored gauntlet onto the warm, vibrating surface of the Chronos crystal. The world turned white. She didn't just feel the crystal, she heard it. It was screaming, a chorus of millions of voices, echoes of pasts that had been lived and futures that were being rewritten, all compressed into a singular moment of agony. It recognized her, not as a keeper, but as a chaotic variable, a human. And then, something unexpected happened. The crystal didn't just dump information into her, it downloaded her stubbornness. It analyzed the erratic, aggressive neural pathways of a human captain who refused to die on an uncharted rock. A shock wave of raw, unrefined temporal energy exploded outward from Thea's hand. It wasn't the refined, rhythmic pulse of the keepers. It was jagged, erratic, and utterly violent. The void hunters didn't just explode, they aged. In the blink of an eye, the metallic locusts rusted, oxidized, and crumbled into fine gray dust as thousands of years of entropic decay hit them in a nanosecond. The silence that followed was deafening. Thea collapsed to her knees, panting, the crystal's light now dim and flickering. The woman was gone, leaving behind only the shimmering, empty robes. "Cairo," Thea rasped, her voice trembling. "Status." "Captain, you're alive? The gravity well just inverted. I'm free, but the hero's scanners are going haywire. The whole planet." "It's not a planet anymore, Thea. It's an engine, and it's waking up." The temple didn't just vibrate. It groaned with the tectonic agony of a colossal machine, shedding layers of eons-old debris. Thea scrambled toward the exit, but the floor beneath her boots shifted, undulating like the deck of a ship in a heavy storm. She stumbled, slamming her shoulder into a wall that was rapidly morphing from ornate, organic architecture into cold, ribbed durasteel. "Cairo!" she shouted into her comms, her voice straining against the rising cacophony of screeching metal. "The whole structure it's not a planet, it's a hull. Everything is moving." "Captain," Cairo's voice came through, but it was layered with a strange, harmonic resonance. "My subroutines, they are being overwritten. I am not accessing the navigation data anymore. The navigation data is accessing me." Thea sprinted through the archway, which was now contracting, closing like a metallic sphincter. She dived through the opening, just as it snapped shut behind her. the heavy thrum of a dormant reactor finally coming to life, shaking the ground so hard she lost her footing again. Outside, the landscape was changing. The gray, dusty plains she had landed on were falling away, revealing immense, interlocking plates of starship-grade alloy beneath. Dust clouds miles high billowed into the atmosphere as the planet began to unfold. It wasn't a world. It was a dormant interstellar dreadnought of unimaginable scale, buried beneath the crust of a dead moon. Thea scrambled toward her shuttle, her heart hammering against her ribs. She looked up. The sky wasn't just the bruised purple of the nebula anymore. It was fracturing. As the dreadnought stirred, its massive maneuvering thrusters, hidden for aeons, ignited. The release of energy was so potent it began to punch holes through the fabric of the nebula itself. She clawed her way into the cockpit of her shuttle, her hands fumbling with the ignition sequence. "Cairo, talk to me. What did you find?" she yelled, her fingers flying across the controls. The navigational computer. "It wasn't a computer, Thea." Cairo's voice sounded miles away, distorted by the massive energy spike the dreadnought was generating. It was a waypoint marker. It was programmed to lead us here to this specific coordinate once the nebula's density reached a critical threshold. I wasn't navigating, Captain. I was being piloted." Thea's blood ran cold. She punched the thrust, and the shuttle groaned, struggling against the localized gravitational distortion of the awakening Leviathan. "Piloted by whom?" she demanded, finally getting the shuttle clear of the surface. She looked back at the planet ship. It was now fully revealed, a monstrous geometric spearhead of a vessel gleaming with ancient unholy power. As it began to ascend, it didn't just fly, it folded space around it. "By the last of the keepers," Cairo replied, his voice chillingly calm. "And they didn't bring us here to save the world. They brought us here to provide the biological override for the main battery. They needed a pilot with a chaotic variable neural signature to unlock the weapon systems." As if on cue, the forward prow of the dreadnought began to glow with a terrifying absolute black light, a singularity cannon aimed directly at the heart of the nebula. Thea realized with a jolt of horror that she hadn't just accidentally saved a life. She had accidentally activated a doomsday device. "I'm not your onboard computer," T snapped, looking into her own eyes, which seemed too dead to belong to her. "We are Thea 4902, replied the hologram in a cold, lifeless voice. "We have died thousands of times trying to stop the devourers. You are the only version that did not try to escape, but instead made contact with the crystal. That makes you the key." The ship shook from a powerful blow. Outside, the titanic structure of the Void Hunter began to emit heated rays of energy, turning the space around it into chaos. Cairo feverishly clicked on the keys, his skin turning an alarming gray. "Thea, the shields are falling. If we don't do something now, we'll just be another piece of debris in this collection," he shouted, trying to stabilize the life support system. "We have a choice," the hologram continued, ignoring the chaos. "You can hand over control to me, and I will use the forge to destroy the enemy at the cost of our lives. Or you can merge with this ship, become its neural network. It will hurt. You will lose part of your individuality, but you will survive." Thea felt the ship vibrate in unison with her heart. She looked at her own cold silhouette and suddenly realized this was not just a copy. It was her own memory, pulled from a time she had not yet lived. She was not trapped. She was in the process of being updated. "What if I choose the third option?" she asked, grabbing the control levers that began to glow blue under her fingers. "I won't give you control, and I won't become part of the machine. I'll just blow up this forge along with you." The hologram showed emotion for the first time, a barely noticeable, almost proud smile. "Then, Thea, you will either become a hero of legend or just another statistic on our list of losses." She pressed the manual control activation button, and Hero released a wave of energy that even forced the massive Void Hunter to pause for a moment. The ship's systems began to transform, deploying hidden weapons she hadn't even known existed. Thea felt every nerve in her body connect with the hull of the unexpected Hero. It wasn't a connection to a computer. It was a symbiosis, where her consciousness spread across microchips, sensors, and guidance systems. She saw not through windows, but through thousands of cameras scattered throughout the hull, seeing light spectra inaccessible to the human eye, ultraviolet, X-rays, streams of gravitational disturbances. The ship was no longer a truck. It was transforming. Metal plates on the sides slid apart, revealing previously hidden energy emitter nodes. They glowed with a cold, almost white light. Cairo, desperately clinging to the console, shouted something, but his voice seemed distant and slow to Thea, like a sound passing through thick water. She was at the center of the storm, and the storm was her. Void Hunter, that giant mechanical pest that eclipsed the stars, fired a volley of plasma shells in response, each of which could vaporize an entire fleet. But Thea didn't even flinch. She calculated the trajectories. Each shell was like a slow-flying stone to her, which she could easily deflect with a glance. She activated new shields. They didn't block the blow, they redirected it, forcing the enemy's energy to curve around the Hero and crash into the attacker itself. The explosion was silent because there was no air in the vacuum to carry the sound, but Thea felt its vibration through the ship's structure. It was a celebration of destruction. "Xero, hold on," she said, her voice coming simultaneously from the ship's speakers and its internal networks. She had struck the forge. She realized that it was not just a weapon or an engine. It was a time-processing station. When she directed the crystal's energy through the cannons, she wasn't just firing, she was firing the past into the enemy's future. The beam of energy that burst from the Hero resembled a torn time rift. When it hit the Void Hunter's hull, it didn't just explode, it began to age. Metal stronger than diamond was covered in rust in a fraction of a second, losing its structure. Huge antennas crumbled to dust. Mechanical limbs fell off, turning into a pile of junk. Thea saw millennia of entropy run through the enemy ship in an instant. It was terrifying and beautiful. She was a god in this small corner of space, and that power frightened her to the core. But then, at the peak of the battle, the hologram reappeared. This time it was clearer, its eyes glowing with the same cold fire as the ship's systems. "You are using the potential of the forge, but you do not understand the consequences," said Thea's copy. "Every shot, every distortion of space consumes one of the iterations. You are wasting your time to gain a minute." "Why do you want me to give up so badly?" Thea steered the Hero into the center of the enemy fleet, fighting her way through the fiery chaos. "What will you gain from this?" "I am you who has accepted fate." replied the hologram. "I am the one who has realized that fighting entropy is futile. We must become part of the system. If you don't let me take control, the Forge will simply throw us into the void. We will become nothing, without memory, without a past, without who we are." Thea felt her own consciousness beginning to blur. The hologram was right. Connecting to the ship required a huge resource base, and it was beginning to eat her memories. For a moment, she forgot what the sky above her home looked like. She forgot the smell of rain on her home planet. She saw her childhood memories turn into lines of code and dissolve into the hero system. Was she Thea, who dreamed of traveling to the stars? Or was she just a program running a cycle? "No," she whispered, closing her eyes in reality to see better in the simulation. "I will not become you. I will not be another entry in your iteration list." She decided to do what previous versions had never done. Instead of fighting the hologram or submitting to it, Thea did the impossible. She directed all of the Forge's energy away from the enemy and away from her own identity. She directed it inward, into the very crystal that was now part of her heart. The space around the ship began to bend like fabric under pressure. The light emanating from the ship became so bright that even the stars seemed dim. She decided to break the cycle. If she couldn't stop entropy, she would cause the universe itself to reboot at this point. Cairo on the bridge shouted, trying to reach her, but she was already far away. She was at the epicenter of creation and destruction. The hologram suddenly opened her eyes wide, and for the first time, something resembling real human fear appeared in them. You can't do this! It will destroy everything!" cried the copy. "It will destroy you," replied Thea, her voice booming like thunder. "But I am real, and I choose the future that I will create myself." The world around her exploded in white light. It was not death. It was liberation. Unlikely Hero began to disintegrate, not into pieces, but into pure energy that seeped into the very fabric of reality. Thea felt her own being transcend space, seeing the entire history of cycles, all the thousands of deaths, all the billions of years compressed into a single moment. She was at the center of it all, and for the first time in many cycles, she felt no fear. She felt the beginning. The Void Hunters' army of thousands began to dissolve. Their mechanical nature, their logic, their purpose, all of it was erased by the wave Thea released. She rewrote the rules of the game. Now, instead of the Forge that reworked time, there was only the pure now. When the light began to fade, she realized she was alone. The ship was gone. The hologram was gone. Cairo. Where was Cairo? She opened her eyes. Endless space stretched out before her, but it looked different. The stars shone differently, as if she were in another universe or in the distant future, where history had not yet been written. She stood on the remains of a structure that had once been a temple. Her helmet lay next to her. She was alive, but was she still human? In her hands, instead of weapons, pulsed a soft, warm light, the remnants of the crystal. It no longer demanded blood or iterations. It had become a part of her. She looked into the void and smiled. History had ended. The legend had begun. Part 6. Echoes of the Future. The white light did not fade. It transformed. It turned into a soft, golden glow that enveloped Thea like a cocoon. The feeling of symbiosis with the ship disappeared, replaced by a deep, calm understanding of all that exists. She no longer felt the pain of losing her memories. On the contrary, They had returned, but now they were not just pictures from the past. They were part of a grand pattern that she had just rewritten. She stood on a fragment of the Temple of Time, drifting in the void. The space around her was clear. The void hunters had disappeared, dissolved by the wave of entropy she had released. The forge ceased to exist as a mechanical structure, transforming into pure energy that now powered this new, rebooted universe. Thea looked at her hands. The crystal that had once demanded blood now pulsed within her, becoming her second heart. She was not just Captain Althea Coronis. She was the keeper of the new cycle. She was the first iteration to survive, and the only one with a chance to write her own story. "Captain?" she heard a faint voice say. Cairo crawled out from under the debris of a console drifting nearby. His scales were dull, and his large eyes were filled with horror and wonder. "Cairo!" Thea rushed to him, her movements light and graceful in zero gravity. She picked him up and felt her own energy flow into him, healing his wounds. Are we alive?" whispered the Volthian, looking at her as if she were a goddess. "Where is the unexpected hero?" "He fulfilled his mission, Cairo," Thea replied, a note of sadness in her voice. "He became part of something bigger." She helped Cairo to his feet. Before them stretched the endless cosmos. But now it was a cosmos full of hope. The stars shone brighter, and the nebula that had once seemed bruised now shimmered with all the colors of the rainbow. Thea sensed movement behind her. She turned and saw the fragments of the temple and the ship beginning to come together, drawn by her will. The golden light emanating from her hands formed a new structure. It was neither a ship nor a temple. It was something in between, a station, a beacon, a new home. "You turned ruins into a beginning," said Cairo, impressed. "We did, Cairo. We did it," Thea corrected him. She looked into the void and felt an echo. It was not the echo of previous iterations, full of fear and death. It was the echo of the future, thousands of lives that now had a chance to exist. She knew that the Time Eaters could return. She knew that entropy had not disappeared. But now this universe had a guardian who was not afraid to fight. Thea raised her hand, and the crystal inside her flashed with a bright light. The beacon was working, sending a signal through space and time. It was not a signal of distress. It was a signal of hope. "Well, navigator," Thea smiled, and her smile was full of determination. "There is much work ahead of us. We must prepare this universe for what awaits it." Cairo nodded, his eyes shining with excitement. Captain Althea Coronis, guardian of the new cycle, stood on the threshold of her new home. She was ready to write her own legend, the legend of a woman who did not submit to fate, but rewrote it.